following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages.
Tonight, we question if the right to freely express one's opinion is limited to a select few, or is it universally applicable? Article 14(1)(a) of Sri Lanka's constitution states that every citizen is entitled to the freedom of speech and expression, including publication. What are the limitations of this right? Are there remedies for the misuse and the limitation of one's freedom of expression? In a world with ever-evolving methods of connectivity, where does Sri Lanka's legal system lie in protecting the public's freedom of expression? Welcome to Law, Land and Liberty, where we discuss the most pertinent legal issue and give a breakdown for our viewers. Now, in the recent past, an issue that most in the social media circles would have witnessed is a certain curb, a certain question that has been raised against the freedom of expression. And we really wanted to get an understanding of this and really give a breakdown of what entirely encompasses the freedom of expression when it comes to Sri Lanka, whether it's limited to certain people, certain institutions, or is it something that is maybe universally applicable to all citizens of this country. To give us this breakdown, we have with us a very special guest and someone who has been with this show and contributed to this show for quite some time, Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us once again. He's the former Human Rights Commissioner. He's a rector at the Sri Pali campus at the University of Colombo and a dean at the University of Technology in the Faculty of Law in Jamaica. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. As we usually take this program forward, what we do is we give a sort of legal take, or we break down the aspects in the constitutions or the acts that have been put in place to cover that specific subject area. But today we might have to shift to a bit of a social discussion as well within the program. So the primary core of this program, which was to explain the law, and with that we'll be taking a bit of a step forward to look at the evolutionary aspects, to look at the social discussion that is around the freedom of expression. So in order to keep up with our general tradition of explaining to our viewers how we are going to take this conversation forward, firstly we are going to talk a bit about the constitutional provisions for the freedom of expression, then talk about malicious intent and how that affects the freedom of expression, then a bit about public responsibilities, public accountability, and finally the key areas where evolution is required in this specific area of law. All right, let's get into the discussion directly. Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa. Doctor, you are a bit of a polymath in this field. People come to you for a variety of instructions to get when it comes to the legal profession. And we are coming to you today also with that same intention, to get an explanation as to the boundaries of the freedom of expression, what we know, what we don't know, the technical aspects, the practical, how it's pragmatically sort of approached by lawyers and everyone in the real world. Before we get into all of that, Professor, where in the Constitution, if we start from there, because that's the most fundamental framework that is put in place to protect the fundamental rights, basically, how is the freedom of speech, freedom of expression defined? What are the parameters? What are the sort of limitations that are in place? What should we be aware of? First of all, is it an absolute right? If you can start there.
Dhanindu, before starting or giving a definition or interpretation to freedom of speech, let me take you to the history. Now, after the Second World War, people's rights were highly recognized. One of the right, after right to life and the existence of human being, is the free speech, which has been recognized long time before in the Lord Buddha's period, in Upali Gruhaputra case. Now, 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was the main document after the Second World War, Article 19, it says every person has a right, free speech, freedom of association, freedom of publication. And this was further expanded in 1966 Civil and Political Rights Convention.
ICCPR.
It's a contract.
Yeah.
So when a country signs, not like a declaration, it's a voluntary obligation. But here there is a legal obligation. So ICCPR committee also there, we have to write reports. There are also Article 19, beyond boundaries. That is free speech, free publication, as well as freedom of association. This has been expanded by several European Union Human Rights Court judgment and other countries also. Now in Sri Lanka, first time this has been 1948 Human Rights Declaration, which has been incorporated in 1972 Constitution as a fundamental right.
Yeah.
So UDHR having 50 rights, this is where one of the civil right.
There is under Article 14. Yes.
No, 1972 Constitution.
1972, okay, sorry.
But the 1972 Constitution, there was one issue. That is the implementation power. A remedy was not there, so they went as a writ. So 1978 Constitution, Chapter 3, Article 14.1, very clearly prescribed. What is that? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of publication. And further it has been expanded to the area political speech.
Yeah.
As well as political, you can reasonably criticize a government policy. You can say good and reasonable criticism also. Now, Article 126, if executive or administration action violate that, then you can go to Supreme Court or Human Rights Commission. Like that. Now you ask whether it's an absolute right. No, it's not an absolute right. Absolute right means under any circumstances, you can't restrict.
Yeah.
Now, likewise, we have two absolute rights in the Constitution. That is where Article 10, freedom of religion. Likewise, then freedom of torture. But this is Article 14.1. There are several restrictions.
Yeah.
But please understand, not only in Sri Lanka, even in UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as ICCPR, both not an absolute right, like right to life. So what has happened here, the same provisions taken to the Constitution. So Article 15 clearly prescribed. What are these? Now, national security, public health, thereafter privacy, prevention of contempt of court, as well as there are several. Now I want to say one thing. Freedom of speech, if a parliament member say anything, he is covered by parliament privileges.
Yeah.
There's an act. So they can say anything.
Within parliament.
Within parliament. Even if it is not in the standing orders, the honorable speaker will say remove from the gazette, Hansard.
Okay.
Other than that, these are the cases. I'll give a very simple case for this. A former parliamentarian and one of the best actor in Sri Lanka, now in prison. What is the reason?
Contempt.
Contempt of court. If you go and do this, you can't protect the institution. These are also false allegations. Finally, he apologized.
Yeah.
Before that, we have to think several times whether this will affect other person's right unreasonably. If you have evidence, but there is a way you can proceed.
Okay.
Rather than your freedom of speech is there, then if you say someone has taken a bribe, then you have the CBOC, Commission of Investigation, Bribery and Corruption. Then they will take. Or you can go to the courts. So likewise, rather than going the legal interpretation, if you go beyond that, then you are violating the law. No one can take law into your hand. Rule of law is very important. And also remember, hate speech, that is also purely restricted. That we have 2007 Civil and Political Right Convention Act. Under that you can take action, as well as we have the penal code certain sections. Now this is where the legal scenario. But when you go to courts, there are several cases in Sri Lanka will come from very recent ones. Now there are certain type of demonstrations against the increasing of fuel prices, cost of living, gas prices. So people now agitated. So they rally around some places. Now there is no public security ordinance, certain circulars are not working now. Emergency regulations are not there. So what they do, they peacefully come to street and they say slogans. Now some slogans may be defamatory for someone. But still, that action must take legally.
Yeah.
If someone, let's see, someone is coming a slogan against me. You are this. Then I can't go and argue and hit him. I also have a right to go and my privacy violate. Yeah. Then I have to take. So now what happened? So people come and rally certain places and now they say certain slogans and police also try to prevent that. So then police go to courts and they submit. This is where public security, public safety, it can be damaged public property, like that. But what recently I have seen several magistrates, these restrictions were not given. Or even whatever the request, whatever the order they ask, not given, they say police have the power. If it is a damage to some place, then they can interfere. Now, certain rallies are coming to Colombo.
Yeah.
These are where sometimes they are blocking one side. So police go to those magistrate courts and they will ask a preventive order. If this come, it will be, derailed all this transportation and other things. But still, the magistrate courts, they deliver. Yes, you can do the demonstration, but it's a fundamental right. So the police having the power under police ordinance, and so if the law violated, police can interfere, no problem.
Yeah.
But one incident, even, it went beyond that, and shooting or firing happened. And thereafter, magistrate court had given order to arrest. So likewise, everyone must, ethically, morally, having the right.
Yeah.
So you can actually, preach certain government policies, as well as you must give a reasonable opportunity. If it is really, really violating certain things, you can criticize.
Yeah.
So the criticism must be reasonable criticism.
Okay.
And for that also several Supreme Court judgments are there.
Professor, before we go for a break, I want to take a quick break on the first segment. If you're a public figure, you are more prone to criticism, and you should be okay with that. Is that something also the court, as in the law, is prescribing? As in, how does that work?
There is a good judgment. Sunday Times Chief Editor Siha Ranatunga versus former President Chandrika Bandaranakumara. It was a column article. In the column, the editor or someone authored that, highly criticized former president activities. So I don't want to tell that in a hotel incident. So thereafter, president filed a case. In that case, the main argument, my private life.
Yeah.
But if you are a public figure, paparazzis are journalists are there. But finally they came for a settlement. So in that case where your private life, your privacy versus public like to know your information. So this type of judgments were there in United Kingdom also. Pamela Harris judgment also like that. So what I want to tell, if you are a public head, you are the first citizens of Sri Lanka, people are watching you.
Yeah.
So therefore we have to give some example to act in a decent way. So that is a very good judgment. So it's not a fundamental right, but it came under law of delicts.
Right.
Violation of privacy.
Right. I think
So
that's
privacy versus freedom of speech that we can discuss more.
a number of key areas that we need to really dive deep into. We'll take a very short break. You're watching Law, Line and Liberty. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law, Line and Liberty. We are in conversation with Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa. Doctor, I think a very good introduction that you had given to sort of like to give the context to this entire discussion. To take the next step, Professor, I want to touch on something you mentioned within our previous segment. Now, it's a number of areas where that I want to iron out with you in terms of details. One is pertaining to, now, we generally hear of the state and a private entity going, the issue being against those two individuals. That's where we go for defamation. It's either more often than not there is a state involvement there. But I think, as we discussed before, also there's if it's a private entity against another private entity that this issue is coming up against, how is relief being provided to either of those parties? Where are the lines drawn for you can't express this? These are things that you cannot say and can do. And the next question I'll be asking is, where can you file those specific cases? How do you explain that, Professor?
Now, Dhanindu, earlier we discussed the fundamental right aspects.
Yeah.
How we are going to, take any action legally. Now, there is a other side of the coin. That means civil action also. Now, if it is a government entity try to restrict the rights, administration or executive action, yes, then you have the constitutional provision to get a redress. If you come as a two private individuals, or maybe a company, which is a newspaper or broadcasting or any type, versus another, then you can go and take a restraint order under civil law. Civil law is basically, you have to say law of dealings. That is your right to privacy or defamation. Continuously they are doing it. So where you are going to file the case? District courts. So you have to put a petition and affidavit and you have to tell the story. So district judge go through very clearly and see whether there is a defamatory or not. I'll give a very good case for this. Now this is where Maho magistrate, his whole character was made as a film. Court is silent in Sinhala Usaviya. And he went to courts. What happened? His argument, if you release this film, it will be negatively affecting me. My whole goodwill, whatever the position in my society, it's a clear defamation. But the restraint order was not given. Why the restraint order was not given? You have to prove it. Maybe it's a true story.
This was before the publication was made.
That's right. And another story where I can tell, Sagarayak Med, there was a film. That was former Justice Minister, Honorable Felix Das R.D. Bandanayaka's whole story was there. And once you see Public Performance Board also, certain parts they asked to remove. But in that case, there was a real defamatory parts were there, but even the district judge given the order, higher authorities asked to release. Right. I'm giving some examples only, right? Yeah. So what I can say, there was another case, former one and only 100 meters Olympic champion, Honorable Susantika Jayasinghe.
Yeah.
But it was given. So these are all before screening,
Yeah.
they get that. Even if you start screening it, you can ask. So I am giving these live examples.
Yeah.
And I can give some other examples also. This is where former mayor Nuwara. Now what happened in this case, certain bribery and corruption actions were published in the newspaper called Yuktiya. And that, if it is gone to Nuwara area, her voters and the, relations will get upset. And this type of newspapers, the whole set which go to Nuwara were destroyed by some people. And some state connection also there. So they went as a case. And he won the case. Now, all these civil action, what will happen? No imprisonment. Nothing like that. This is basically happening. You can claim for damages. Now, when you are claiming damages, you have to send a,
Letter of demand.
letter of demand. Now, once you send the letter of demand, sometimes he will correct it.
Yeah.
Sri Lanka, we have press council one side. And former Minister Ravi Karunanayake, against him, that TV channel, public owned one, every day after the news, they apologize.
Right.
Otherwise, you have to pay millions. Okay. And even there was another case where one newspaper that's owned to government, and he was living in London,
Okay.
published some articles against him, and the agent was there in UK. He filed the case and he won it.
Okay.
So likewise, it's a worldwide. That case was Prince Gunasekara, a former parliamentarian. Against him, some certain type of unproved allegations were there.
Yeah.
But when they were trying to get the damages, properly appointed agent was not there in UK. So that was the case. So likewise, I can mention many. Now there were certain things where, because of the defamatory, certain type of contents in newspapers, and the restriction was given. So always you have to remember, if there is a unrest time period like a war, they appoint contempt authority. Okay. So that contempt of authority, the person, he go through and he also censors certain things.
Right.
So if you censor it, then people may not read certain areas. So they think after reading that, really people get confused.
Right.
So likewise, competent authority, which has the power. But all these things are where, not in a way the country is running in a democratic process. And if you see communist countries, you can't criticize communism. So they monitor, they censor, they restrict. But Sri Lanka, it is not there. Yeah. And some Middle East countries, WhatsApp calls you can't take. And they are monitoring. Why they do it? To protect their society. So when you criticize Sri Lanka, I will give several countries. They surveil, they monitor, and they take action. Specifically communist countries. China, Russia, Cuba, Vietnam. They do that. To protect the system. But in a liberal country or a democratic country, you can say anything. If it is going against, if it is a state, you can take action against them under fundamental right violation. As you asked.
It's a private entity.
Yeah. Now let's see, it's coming in FB.
Yeah, Facebook.
That is the biggest problem today. Now,
any social media.
I'll give a good example. FB, someone posted a news. This night, petrol will be increased by 48 rupees. So that news shared several people. Yeah. And night, I also went to the petrol queue. And after that only, the minister said, no, there is no fueling. So chaos. Now people believe whom? People believe social media. Because they have no trust with the minister or anyone. Immediately it can be increased. But finally it was a false one. So who can take action against it? People will say it's a freedom of speech. But I suffered. You suffered with that. So these things must be controlling. There must be some ethics, code of conduct. FB is only a facilitator. But they have the right to, censor that. If it is hate speech, definitely they censor. That's why FB has recruited people who can read Sinhala and Tamil. So they censor their account. Sometimes they ask to take a court order and come. So FB has created a very innovative way for the youngsters. Now, at the time 1971 insurrection, 88, they didn't have anything. Only the Sri Lanka Broadcasting Corporation. But today it is not. Within 1 second it goes. So can you take an action against the person who make that false news? Maybe he's not in Sri Lanka, he's in another country, he's hosting. But I have seen in Sri Lanka several TV channels as well as FM channels, their license temporarily cancelled. In one incident, I will give it to you in the LTT period, that say this village has been, attacked by LTT cadres. But finally nothing was there. In a village in Anuradhapura area, temporarily they cancelled the license because it is given under Sri Lanka. There are 2 organizations, that is Sri Lanka Telecommunication Regulation Authority, broadcasting they did, and some are under Sri Lanka Rupawahini Act. These licenses are given. So you must be closely monitor that. Now in Sri Lanka issue, give me 1 minute. Now when you talk about the Sri Lanka issue, anyone can, publish anything. Whether people not believing whether it's true or false.
Exactly.
Then how we are going to take action against
that? A number of key questions that I have to ask you, Professor, but we have to take a very short break. We'll come back and we'll discuss all of this. You're watching Law, Line and Liberty. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa, and we are getting an understanding of where the limitations lie when it comes to freedom of expression and whether it's exclusive to certain individuals. Now, Professor, you gave a very good context in our first 2 segments where we need to file these cases, what sort of individuals would be qualifying to sort of like the victims in the scenario. Now, words that are being thrown around, Professor, is the fact that the freedom of expression was mostly defined maybe not by the constitution but by the common law, which is what you also quoted in these scenarios. Now, since we did take up the example of social media also, which is pretty vast, and if the perpetrator is in a different country, you might as well forget about getting relief, which is a problem in current status quo. So what would you suggest, or which key areas, when maybe we need to get social media in particular, should we really evolve, or is it something that we should do from our ethics aspect, our social sort of accountability, the responsibilities we have humans should improve, and not something that the law should interfere into?
Now, you can implement the judgments. I'll explain later, right? Now, Facebook company or social media platform, they also have guidelines, instructions, code of ethics. They specifically say if they violate, their account may be suspended for some period. And then you have to put several likes. So 1 month, 2 months, they give the warning. So even you are not following that, you are criticizing someone with a false allegation, then he will report technically to the Facebook. Then what type of action the Facebook company can do, they will restrict or ban the account. But if it is a fake account, what will happen? 90% I know, those people who are disseminating these type of false news, allegation, information are fake accounts.
Yeah.
Even the company is not taking any action against the fake account. So you take your name and then after reporting only these things can happen. So that is where violating company policy, company guidelines and instructions.
Yeah.
But they take immediate action, disharmony or creating a conflict between two religions, then they will immediately ban that. So even they monitor randomly. So they know the people who are behind this. And the Ministry of Defense also can. So even FB, if you temporary ban, they go with VPN and other technologies are there, then the monitoring is very high. So locally also they can surveil. But can they use those evidence in a court of case? Now they are taking without my consent.
Yeah.
And then whether we have signed any type of contract, you have to see it. So social media, number one, whether the user or the person who feed or upload must take the responsibility. Now the argument where you may take a restraint order or some type of a limitation order, but the person not in Sri Lanka, he is in another jurisdiction. For that there is a law. There is 1958 New York Convention. That was implementation of foreign judgments and arbitral awards. Then the case heard in Sri Lanka, you have to deposit that case in that jurisdiction and then to implement. But something like this may not, if it is a contract or if it is a very high value one, definitely you can arbitration. And also you can get the mutual legal assistance MLA in some countries. So that is coming under embassies can support. So I don't think these type of, simple messages, millions are disseminated. Yeah. Now even I have seen in the US election period, there was an allegation against the former president. Son has given some money for another country terrorist.
Biden said.
That's right. So it
Ukraine.
was a huge issue.
Yeah.
But later they found that was a fake news. So likewise, the other side, that is natural law. But how to stop that?
Yeah.
So even you go to a court, they give the priority for the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of publication, freedom of demonstration. So likewise, they go it as a fundamental right.
Yeah.
The violation or even the restriction coming under second stage. So it's very hard for you to prove. Now let's see in the COVID-19 period, it is under public health.
Yeah.
You can't disseminate anything against that. It will violate others' rights. So the restrictions were there. Yeah. Now, whether we have a clear mechanism monitoring these things and taking action. If it is a local newspaper, if it is a FM channel, if it is a TV channel, yes, you can. But all these hosts are not in Sri Lanka, even the host in another country. So we must take the self-regulation guidelines in like some countries. But when people angry, people go against, now that anger or maliciously, they disseminate those things. Yeah. And whether people believe it, and what is the counter mechanism? Now I have not seen much freedom of speech cases under social media had gone to courts. And how many suicide cases were there? Now your result published in school, but your friend sending a SMS message or social media message, you have failed. So in Kuliyapitiya, this innocent child committed suicide, but she was the top in the list. So you are, destroying others' life.
Yeah.
Unwanted conflict, family conflicts, all these are rising. And you can superfeed these bodies. Now I have seen they take that part and superfeed for a nude body.
Yeah.
And it disseminate.
Yeah.
You have to think twice on that. When you take legal action, too late.
Too late. No, my next question, Professor, was going to be exactly that now. When you take the case of the former vice president's issue, or even we'll leave specifics aside, if the impact from that specific action of defamation or misinformation affects something immediate, the relief that comes afterwards wouldn't make any impact. I mean, wouldn't actually be some tangible relief for this individual. I think this is where we shift from the legal aspect to the moral and the ethical side of it. Can the law reach out to that, or should, from that point onwards, the social sort of ethics within that society be able to cater to that? Because I think, at least within our last segment, I want to talk a bit about the damages that some defamation from a fake account or somewhere could do to the livelihoods, the very lives maybe even of individuals, and there will either be no way to get relief, or the relief would be too late. What is your message rather in those scenarios?
Now, freedom of speech, within 1 second, you can disseminate through FB. If it is good, yes, all right. Tomorrow morning, you can gather to this place. Everyone there disseminating. So people come. London riots are like that. So you should use these social media platforms not to violate others' right. Exactly. Having a public rally, it's all right. So one side you think morally and ethically how you are going to fix to that. And the other side also you have to see immediate reporting.
Okay.
Now I'll explain. If it is a fundamental right violation, imminent violation also there.
Yeah.
If you are getting type of news, definitely your rights going to violate. The imminent violation also there. But that is very hard in the civil law. Now, after publishing only, you will get to know. Even it will not send to your phone. It will send to your friend's phone. Then he will call and tell you, hey, look here, something is disseminated.
Yeah.
Already the damage done. Okay. Then your family frustrate, your friends frustrate. Do you know this is really a fake news? But you can go to courts and make a claim. So it will drag for some time. Immediately, if you ask restraint order, it may not given. But now, many courts, even in Sri Lanka, they go with electronic transaction act, amended, all these filings and all, you can go. So immediate, now let's see, when people are sleeping, they can start this.
Exactly.
Then tomorrow morning it go to the whole world. Then how you believe it? Then source is very important.
Exactly.
That's why I'm telling, even in other countries I have seen, I was in Caribbean islands, even in Jamaica, they have advised their citizens, please see the source who is disseminating. I have not much seen that in Sri Lanka. Without the source, now Jamaicans or even in Caribbean countries, they don't trust.
Okay.
And also, to double check, they will give a hotline also.
Great.
But if it is done by the individual, now they are not, believing it.
Yeah.
So that culture
needs to be brought in.
But in Asia, it is not there. In Asian culture, everything, the woman is suffering.
Yeah.
So that is a cultural aspect I am telling. Even whether she had a good character. But within 1 minute, you can tarnish that. Yeah. People believe it. So that culture, with the new generation, they are changing. Yeah. I have seen recent actions, lot of thing dissemination. If you permit me, I will tell that. In one place, they shown several condoms.
Okay.
But people didn't believe it.
They wanted the source.
That's right. They want to, break, or you want to harm that, some type of struggle, let's say. But that was not a news.
Exactly.
So likewise, people now know self-restriction they have put. So like I am giving only the example, right? So that's the new generation, more technology levy. They take action before the society. Number two, the law. That procedure is very, very important. Immediately the court cannot give. One country I have seen, Israel. Israel, sometimes they run the courts 24 hours. Now Sri Lanka, it is very hard because of the population. Like St. Lucia, one of the country in Caribbean countries. Very smart. Quickly they take action. So for that, you have to have all the police department as well as now all these FB handles CID, Criminal Investigation Department. There is a special cyber crime unit. And also you are reporting your cyber crime. If it is done by your harm or bullying or anything. Several, places are there. But even when you take the action, even Sri Lanka Police Department, CID, they write to FB. Sometimes FB say, no, we can't take anything, then any action. You go to courts and take a court order, that magistrate court order, we will do it. So collaboratively, we have to sign some MOU. Now, New York, FB company, our ambassador is there. So they don't want to harm any country purposely. But it can go negative way. I am not asking to restrict or even to stop it. How to, divide fake news and even a true news. Filtering. That is a pure technical situation.
Exactly.
So the countries must work as understanding as well as how the people behave. Now Sri Lanka, we are in a terrible position. One side economic struggle is there, strikes are coming, and political unrest. So the government also having a responsibility. Institutions are there, I'm not going to name them, but they must also take this. But when you go to courts, if 100 times, they respect the fundamental rights. Subject to that only, other restrictions are coming up.
Professor, we need to take a very short break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the vacuums that exist within the legal framework, specifically in Sri Lanka. This is Law, Line and Liberty. Stay with us. Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in our last segment and we are in conversation with Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa. Doctor, if we're scaling back from all the information that we have collected all throughout this segment, something that I notice is, again, the law will not be able to encompass everyone, protect everyone, but it should do its level best. There are certain scenarios where people might take advantage of this anonymity, as not the certain scenarios, I mean, more often than not, they will come from a fake account or anything, and defame, maybe not the legal meaning of defame, but do some form of damage under the pretext of freedom of expression. And then they would continue, that damage might even affect as I said before, the livelihoods maybe, the business, sort of the outlook that a business has. And the one scenario that you mentioned was here to show the exact amount or the exact sort of impact, the damage that specific action had. Apart from things like that, Professor, apart from people hiding maybe behind the fact that the freedom of expression is available and not look at the repercussions of those of exercising that, what would you suggest as these are key areas? Now we are running short of time, but key areas that you think that we, the legal system, should focus on and improve on in the coming years within our country?
Two ways. India, they have a solution. India, they have year 2000 Information Technology Act, amended several times. For all these type of harassment, sexual harassment, bullying, lot of, strict laws are there. So the first thing, our Computer Crime Act 2007, immediately it has to be amended. Okay. And also United Kingdom, they have Computer Monitoring Act. So those laws must be introduced. Now, if you say UK, it's a democratic country, liberal country. But still they are protecting others' rights if it is go beyond that. And also you have seen this Prevention of Terrorism Act now. They will amend that. Yeah. But still these type of, news, if you are disseminating, you have to take that action. And the other one is economic loss. Our example, continuously damaging a company. And they have their clientele. They believe that. And drastically, they are losing their profit. So whatever this is economic loss. Yeah. For that, you have to see whether this is purposely, intentionally, someone is doing it. Then you must have specifically cyber security as well as cyber intelligence. This is why digital forensic evidence is very important. Now, Sri Lanka, there are capable people, but the protection of digital evidence, forensic evidence, is less places. So the government must facilitate to have these places. That is technically and supported. So Sri Lanka, we have 1995 Evidence Special Provision Act, which amended in 2 times 1999. Audio, video, graphic, all this you collect as evidence to prove your case. Yeah. Even in FB, they will take it. Now, in USA, when you are serving summons, FB. Because most of the people now we are in FB, there was a court judgment to do it. Right. So I mean 3 ways you have to do it. Number 1, the legal framework. Number 2, collaboration with the institution. And number 3, we must have strict guidelines how to prevent it and technical side. So if you bring all these into one platform like India, I have seen when I visited Karnataka, one of the conference, I may have seen. And they also now ethically not damaging another person. Right? If it is a political way or political ideology, that also they respect. Yeah. Indian Marxist Communist Party is in power. So they are, educating the general public. But here when it is agitation or political, post when you are doing it, you must think twice. Right. I mean, you have the freedom, but your freedom must end with near the nose of someone.
I think very well put, Professor. We'll have to end our discussion there, but I think a lot of important things that people can really focus on. We really broke down the freedom of expression and where the limitations lie with Dr. Prathiba Mahanamahewa, former Human Rights Commissioner, the Rector of the Sri Pali campus in the University of Colombo, and a Dean for the University of Technology in the Faculty of Law in Jamaica. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right. Fundamental rights are a key part of a country's progress towards developing its civil status. As we discussed, the right to express one's opinion holds a pivotal position in this regards. In conclusion to tonight's program, I would like to leave these thoughts by world-renowned author and political analyst George Orwell. He once said, "If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear." That is all from us here at Law, Land and Liberty. If you had missed today's program, you can watch the entire episode on our YouTube channel, youtube.com, Derana English. Join us again next week as we break down a contemporary legal topic. I am Danny Dithanwasa. Have a great night.